Good afternoon, everyone. As Steve said, my name is Liz Hughes. I'm a Chief Superintendent in Avon and Somerset Police, and my role is to be the lead for public protection. So I have got a force-wide role covering all of the different local authorities that make up Avon and Somerset. And with me today is Lisa, who are allowed to introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lisa Simpson. I'm a superintendent and I work predominantly in the local authority areas of Somerset and North Somerset, and I have the neighbourhood teams who are responsible for all of the crime prevention work and the proactive interventions with children and vulnerable people, which is relevant to this. And I don't report directly to Liz, but I report to Liz with regard to the vulnerability work, and then we have a whole different line management structure, which will become relevant to this presentation.
Thank you, Lisa. So we're going to talk to you for the next few minutes about the Somerset Joint Targeted Area Inspection, which I will refer to as JTAI from now on to prevent it being from a little bit less of a mouthful. And this was an inspection from last year. So just a summary there for you. So the JTAI inspection was on serious youth violence in May 2024. And the JTAI inspection teams are a multidisciplinary inspection team. So they'll be from the Care Quality Commission, His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services, Ofsted, and also the Inspection of Probation. And so those cross sort of departmental inspections came last May to look at the services across Somerset in relation to serious youth violence. And that resulted in an ungraded letter, which was published on the 18th of June. The full letter is on the website if people want to read the full content of the letter. But effectively, it was a real fork in the road moment, I think, for us at a strategic level in Somerset, because the findings told us that we weren't being effective at a strategic level in identifying, understanding, or responding to the extent of serious youth violence and criminal exploitation for children in Somerset. And also what it told us was that the oversight of that partnership working, led by the Safer Somerset Partnership and the Somerset Safeguarding Children's Partnership, lacked sort of sufficient rigour, drive and challenge in that area. So all of us who work at a strategic level, see very much our responsibility to making things better for children and families, and for all of you who are working in this area, who've joined us on the screen today. So as a result of that very sort of difficult feedback, there was a real coming together to make sure that we really put our shoulder behind the wheel to make things much, much better across the whole partnership. And Lisa will go on to some of that work later in the presentation. So just in terms of some of the headline findings, for those of you who sort of aren't aware of the inspection, there was good practice identified. So whilst the letter did criticise us at a strategic level, it gave some really good feedback around things that you are all doing really well to improve things for children across Somerset. So you'll see those areas on the screen there. So we responded well when there was a clear and immediate risk to children at risk of serious youth violence. Some local neighbourhoods proactively responded to local concerns and had good programmes of diversion. The CAMS approach again was timely. The knowledge about serious youth violence and injured children affected in it was good in the Youth Justice Service. There was good expertise and knowledge in the Children's Social Care Out of Hours team, and some locally commissioned services in that voluntary space were really helping children understand risks associated with serious youth violence. So there's lots of fantastic work going on. It was just about strengthening that strategic response to enable that in a more effective way. So some of the headline findings where we had areas of concern included lack of safeguarding oversight and appropriate referrals to children's social care by staff working in the emergency departments in hospitals, a lack of information sharing by the police with partners or information intelligence relating to serious youth violence and criminal exploitation, a very high rate of exclusions from Somerset schools. It's set against in a national context of children being identified. And we know that with that high rate of exclusions, there is evidence-based to say that children are more susceptible to serious youth violence if they're not in school, and particularly sort of where children have special educational needs and disabilities. Again, an additional sort of vulnerability factor there for the exploitation of children there. And a lack of system-wide targeted training in relation to serious youth violence, which I know we'll go on to more as we go through this presentation. I think when I was reading the presentation in the weekend, there was a line that really struck me in terms of recognising everybody's good practice in people on this screen. It says the success of these interventions were relying too heavily on the skills, dedication and tenacity of individuals. So certainly for Lisa and I, operating in that strategic space, really important, working across with all the strategic leads across Somerset, that we really sort of made sure through a comprehensive action plan that we started to improve that approach for children and communities. So I'll hand to Lisa, who's going to take us through the progress on the plan following the inspection.
Thank you. And I'm with Liz entirely. What was really very clear was that our teams, irrespective of which agency or third sector team they're in, the inspection found very clearly that there was an awful lot of what we summarised in the end when we were debriefing as workarounds, that all the great work was going on and people were trying to work around and navigate a complex system of governance, or indeed where we don't necessarily have the right governance in place to make things better for children. And indeed that is what was happening. But this, in this last year, has given us the focus to work out, well, what next? So there's been quite a lot of work going on in the various spaces. I think the fundamental part was that the governance pathway, the processes that are listed here on this slide, we had in Somerset lots of different and really effective groups where we were discussing children, but they weren't linked up, and we weren't necessarily basing it on what is the intelligence telling us, what are all of our systems talking to each other to tell us, so, and where do all of those structures feed into each other. So ultimately the responsible bodies of the Safer Somerset Partnership and the Safeguarding Partnership had good, what we would call reassurance. And if Claire Winter were here, she'd be talking about we were excellent at reassuring each other. And that's something that is strong in Somerset because of our working bonds are fairly long lived. There's less transient in operating practitioners and managers in Somerset than there might be in other local authority areas. So we all know each other really well. We're all really candid and have great conversations. So the reassurance was great, but the assurance, actually knowing, well, why? How do we know that to be true? And are we checking and testing, was found to be weak. And the two bodies that are responsible for that, the Somerset Safer Somerset Partnership and the Safeguarding Partnership, needed to be better at that. So we had a real thrust on where do we talk about children, where do we assess what risks, and then where do we specialise and talk about those children that are at risk of specific harm, or what is the front door, where does the front door work feed in, and what are we doing? So I know that's not overly clear on this slide, but if we were to enlarge that flip chart there, that is what became the new proposal. The details in there, you probably can grow it on your own screens, but it would demonstrate all the different layers of meetings now where we're hoping that children involved in any sort of potential harm or any flag to any agency, that we've got a system that's reflected in that colour-coded chart now of meetings where we will pick them out bespoke to what the actual threat is. So there's work there now. So I mean, I can go through afterwards, and there might be questions and answers about what do all those meetings say. It's not to say that 1 year on we've sorted it all out, we've shaken it down, and we've now got great governance, and we've got all of the meetings in process. What we have got is a structure where that meeting system and the right partners are in the right rooms with the terms of reference, and now we're sorting out the data sets that feed into all of them so that we can go from the tactical layer of the earliest intervention into a meeting of different layers of partnership officers to work out, okay, well, now what's the threat to the bespoke problem? There we've got on this slide the work. If anyone wants to find out more about this work that's there in the SIN-ROTH, I think Wednesday's forum is going to be talking specifically to that with a different presenters that will be able to go into detail, but that's just one example. We've strengthened the Safer Somerset priorities meetings, where partners come together to talk about those layers of children or areas or families where as a single agency we're not really making ground and we need a joint agency approach, and from there, where do they feed into the next strategic layer? Moving along, so I'm having a technical moment, it's frozen. There we go. Right, the next slide. Part of the report, or a large part of the report, talked about our ability to share information. So great to get our governance right, great to get the right people around the table, but actually going back to what they found around individuals knowing their children, knowing their areas and doing great workarounds, actually what's the intelligence, what's the basis for those children we really need to talk about? How do we know, and where are we getting it from? Again, great single agency levels of knowledge and some evidence of information sharing at a more sort of cross partnership level, but not enough, and not enough fast enough was the basic finding. There were some parts of the findings that talked about the police robotics provision to share, and there were some problems with that we've started to iron out around what flags in the robotics, what can we share and when, and getting it as early as possible and as thoroughly as possible. Looking at the risk assessment tools that we were all using, it's fair to say that across the agencies our assessment of risk is different and layered, and it doesn't mean to say there can be one size that fits all, but we're working better as a collaboration to say what are the common risks that we should all be seeing, where's the professional curiosity, and what are we asking people to be aware of, and where are we training it so the right practitioners understand that as well. The share meeting there is another one from that structure you saw on the flip top, going back a bit. The share meeting, which is, none of these are catchy titles, I'm afraid, but that's the Serious Harm Action and Reduction, Reducing Exploitation panel, which looks at the really complex and acute people. That's where we have formed a completely new structure so we can pull out that exploited few. And then there's a message there about Somerset NHS Foundation Trust recording system and aligning what flags and risks they had in their systems and getting that shared more appropriately and effectively as well. The multi-agency training tools, again, in policing, we recognise that because of our complex governance and because of the nature of many of our different specialist teams touching exploitation in children and vulnerable adults, some of the training needed to be married up and brought together, and Liz is working really hard in bringing her public protection work to hold the training part to account, to work out where at every touch point of people joining and then refreshing. So we need to really bring exploitation into the mix, and we're really reviewing that now to say how do we make it more efficient, more effective and more relevant. But that's going across all of the agencies as well, and trying to work out what is a multi-agency tool that really speaks to the risks that everybody has got in common when they're working with children. And some things like trauma, we talk about trauma-informed, being trauma-informed practitioners, being professionally curious. It matters not whether it's NHS, police, children's social care, third sector, we're all using those language, we're all talking in that way, but are we training our teams to really understand what does that mean and how is that going to benefit children in Somerset, and try to assimilate and make more efficient the training programmes we're offering across the piece, which will hopefully, it says there, include the improving practitioner knowledge on trauma practices, and the SSCP being really responsive now to reviewing what we're offering as tools and then getting out some common and appropriate for all training. And I think that takes us to the next slide, which shows us where there's 3 modules now available for everybody here. I am just going to bring Steve in because, of course, you've been fundamental to working that through, but the training packages are live. I can only but commend them to you as great for all of our practitioners to bring some commonality. Steve?
Absolutely. Thank you, Lisa. And yeah, as Lisa says, we've commissioned 3 e-learning modules that you can see there. We've also got another one on our own training site as well. I think 2 of those, the gangs and youth violence, the violence reduction, are really sort of diving into specific areas. The understanding the impact of mental health and vulnerability of young people was very kindly gifted to us from Royal Greenwich Safeguarding Children Partnership, who during the JTAI inspection, the inspectors did cite as some really useful e-learning there. And it's actually a webinar. It's a really fascinating insight, both in terms of the vulnerabilities challenges for children and young people in relation to their mental health, which may increase their vulnerability to exploitation and youth violence, but also what impact serious youth violence has on young people's mental health and well-being as well. So a really sort of fascinating insight into that. And within that e-learning, we've split it down into different chapters, much shorter sort of bite-sized videos to go through. So hopefully it'll be a really useful resource for you. My colleagues just pop the link to those in the chat as well if you'd like to access those afterwards.